What's up, Emerge? This is Minister Zach coming to you live from the Spring. I'm so excited about the sermon, and really even the discussion we're about to have today, because I really want to actually break down last week's sermon as I introduce this week's sermon. Last week, I preached Why Jesus Part 1, and this week, I'm preaching Why Jesus Part 2, and I'm so excited about what we're going to be doing today. So today, I'm actually going to start reading verse 27, and then I'm going to end at verse 29 in Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, starting at verse 27 and concluding at verse 29. It says this: when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. I want to read verse 27 again. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. I'm going to be preaching today, Why Jesus, Part 2, but I'm going to pray before we get started. Father, I thank you so much because you are constantly blessing us over and over. God, speak to us today in a way that you have never spoken before. In Jesus' name, amen. Why Jesus, Part 2. I ended last week talking to you about how the people had failed this woman. And I really want to explain what I was trying to get you to understand is that when she was going through her life, she had went from doctor to doctor. I'm explaining this section because I don't know who hasn't seen Why Jesus Part 1. So I want to make sure I really explain Why Jesus Part 1 so I can get into Why Jesus Part 2. People were failing this woman. She went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and instead of getting better, she grew worse. The people that were certified, the people who were supposed to answer her questions, the people who were supposed to have solutions to her problems were the same people denying her help. It was the people who were supposed to be there. It was the people who were supposed to give her needs were the same people who could not give her anything. It was the people who had the medicine that could not give her the cure. It was the people who were supposed to have the answers were the same people who all they gave to her were problems. She went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. People were failing her. People were denying her. People were turning their backs on her. People were leaving her isolated and alone. In fact, this is a theme that we find all throughout the Bible. Before you can find growth within yourself or within your community or within your church, sometimes God will place you in uncomfortable conditions in order for you to see who really has the answers. This is what this woman is dealing with. She's dealing with the same thing Joseph went through. Joseph went through a period in his life where he was isolated from people. He went through a period in his life where he was betrayed. He went through a period in his life where he had been forgotten about. This is exactly what had happened to David when he was anointed as king. He was placed right back into the field. This is what happened to Daniel. Daniel was placed in a den of lions. This is what had happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were placed in a fiery furnace. This is what had happened to Moses as he was isolated. He was thrown out of Egypt. He was thrown out of the family that he knew and was placed into the desert. This is what happened to Jonah as he was told to go somewhere. Jonah was then isolated in the belly of a fish. I'm just trying to get you to understand that this is what is seen in the Old Testament. People who are supposed to be growing, people who are supposed to be doing great things for God, oftentimes will see discouragement and will see discomfort before they see seasons of success. This has spoken to me and has resonated me in different levels. I'm trying to get you to know that even as young people, We want to be successful, and we want to have all the money. As guys, we want to have all the girls. As people, we want to have all of the success. We want to live luxurious lives. We want to have the big house. We want to have the big family. But I'm just trying to get you to know that before you can reach success, sometimes you have to be placed in discomfort. I'm trying to get you to understand. I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to give you fake news. I want to tell you the truth that before you can get to the mountaintop, sometimes you have to walk through the valley. This is something that is resonating with me as I'm getting into this thing called ministry, as I'm experiencing this thing called the burdensome joy. I'm understanding that sometimes before you get to the joyous parts, you experience the burden. I'm trying to get you to know as young people that when people are failing you and relationships are fizzling out, you have to go to someone else for the answers. And this is what this woman in the text has experienced. She's experienced a time in her lives where doctors were not giving her the answer. She experienced a time in her life where the people who were not who are certified were not giving her the proper certification. She was experiencing a time in her life where she had friends, but those friends walked away from her. She was experiencing a time in her life where she had the people that she needed. She had an inner circle, but instead of getting better, instead of getting more comfort, she grew worse. This woman originally was okay and now appears to be upset, appears to be messed up, appears to be depressed, appears to be in pain. How many times have you tried to look like what you feel like, but instead of covering it up, instead of masking up, you can no longer deny that I am upset. This is what we are experiencing as young people. We are experiencing times in our lives where we could be grieving, we could be in agony, we could be in pain, and instead of being able to hide it, now we have to ask the question, why Jesus? When people aren't working. People who are supposed to have the answers no longer can give them to me because my problem is above them. The knowledge that requires an answer is now above their knowledge. So who do I go to? Because everyone that's around me doesn't have the answers. This woman, actually in the text, it says somewhere in Leviticus, and this was my second point from last week, that the church was failing her. Now I want to get this. I want you to understand what I'm saying. I don't want you to think that, oh, Zach's saying that the church in itself is failing. No, because Sunday school is essential. The church is essential. Worship is essential. The choir is essential. Audio and video is essential. The pastors and the ministers are essential. I'm not saying that things in the church are I'm just trying to get you to understand that she could not go to the church. She could not go anywhere in the church. In Leviticus, it said that a woman with her condition was considered ceremonially unclean, which means that she could never enter the church doors. So now this woman who has experience in her life, 12 years ago, she went to church. 12 years ago, she was told that the church is the place that she could go whenever she needed it. But now this woman is facing a time in her life where she realized that church just simply is not working. Church isn't somewhere that I can go. Church is not somewhere that I can be accepted. And this is exactly where we are living in 2020, entering into 2021, entering this new year, still in a pandemic. We're realizing that I haven't been to church in a long time. The church isn't a place where I can walk into anymore. I haven't been here in the place where it is said that the Spirit is. I haven't been in the place where the pastor's at and the youth minister is at. I haven't been in the place where the choir is at. So what do I do when church simply does not seem to be working? I haven't been in the church. I've been at home. I haven't been at school. I've been at home. I haven't been to work. I've been at home. What do I do when the things that I would occupy my time simply aren't satisfying my life? What do I do where the places I I used to be able to go and the people I used to be able to see simply aren't allowing me to enter into their presence. What do I do when the place that is said to have all the answers I just simply cannot go to? This is where this woman was, and this is where I ended off my sermon last week, talking to you about how people had failed her. The doctors had disappointed her, and now she cannot enter the church because she is considered unclean. This is where this woman is in the text, resorting to all these solutions but not finding anything because she's not allowed in the church and she can't talk to people. What do you do when you can't talk to people and you can't go to the church? This is where we are in the text as I'm entering verse 27. Last week was all about her physical problems. It was all about physical things, things she could touch. She could touch people, but she couldn't. She could walk into the church, but she wasn't allowed to. This was what was happening in the text. Last week was all physical, but this week is all mental, because now we see that it is suggested in verse 27 that she heard about Jesus. She heard about Jesus. I need you to catch what I'm saying, because this is extremely important to the text, that she had heard about Jesus. You can't hear about something unless you surround yourself by people who had experienced the something that you're thinking about. Let me break that down for you. It's the people that she surrounded herself by that was enhancing her mind to think about Jesus. This is very important for the generation of 2020, because oftentimes we can surround ourselves by social media. We can surround ourselves by the negativity that we see. We can surround ourselves by the things that we think aren't correct. We can surround ourselves by people who are filling our minds with something that isn't true. We can find ourselves surrounding ourselves by people who don't have the answers. But this woman, apparently, she was around the right people. And if I could challenge you to do anything today, I want to challenge you to surround yourself by the right people. Surround yourself by people who are reading the Bible. Surround yourself by people who are praying. Surround yourself by people who are free worshipers. Surround yourself by people who know who has the answer. The thing about this woman is she didn't surround herself by people who had the answers. She surrounded herself by people who knew who had the answers. That is the key to the problem. That's the key to the solution, because at first she was going to the people who she thought had the answers, but now she's surrounding herself by people who know who has the answers. That's exactly what it is. I've got to put myself in an area of my life and surround myself by people who will tell me to go pray about it, who will tell me to go read about it, who will tell me to go study it, who will tell me to go think about it, who will tell me to go talk to the pastor, who will tell me to go talk to the youth minister, who will tell me I need to go find the one who has the answers. And when she had found the one who had the answers, it said that she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. I need you to catch this, because the first week I was talking to you about stepping outside of the crowd. Now this woman has found herself in the inconvenience of being in the crowd, pressing her way to Jesus, pressing her way to get to the man who has all the answers. This is what this woman had did. She heard about Jesus. So what she did was she made the action to go see about Jesus. She heard about what Jesus was doing. She heard that Jesus was healing people. She heard that Jesus was not just a miracle worker, but that he was the master. And because she heard about Jesus, it put her feet into steps and it made her walk and press her way to the man with the miracles. When she heard about Jesus, it initiated action. It took the faith of what she heard to make her believe that he had the answers. So what she did, I want to stay true to the text. What she did was she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Read that. When she heard about Jesus mentally, she came up behind him physically in the crowd and touched his cloak. What you hear and what you know mentally will enable you to act physically. Don't miss what I just said. What you hear and what you know. You could hear the sermon, but what you do after the sermon defines if you believe it or not. You can hear everything that Pastor Taylor talks about, but what you do after you hear the sermon defines if what you heard is what you believe. It's what you hear. It's what you hear and what you do with the knowledge that you've heard that defines the next steps and actually what you put your faith in. This woman heard about Jesus. So she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Watch this next verse. Because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Remember, she surrounded herself by people who had the answers. I don't feel like I need to get hype. I feel like I can have a conversation. Is that okay? I feel like I can really talk this thing through. Is that she heard about Jesus. So because she heard about Jesus, she was able to think that if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. I want you to imagine this woman pressing her way in the crowd. That some versions talk about how it was the lower part of his garment. So imagine her crawling on the ground, pressing her way to Jesus. If I could just touch his cloak, if I could just touch his cloak, if I could just touch this cloak, I will be healed. In order for her to be healed, she got to on the lowest point that she could. She got to the bottom of herself. She got down on her knees and crawled her way to Christ. She didn't just walk in front of him. She didn't just go to where he was, but she crawled her way. She pressed her way to the man who was the master. It wasn't about a prideful thing because she was extremely humble. She got on the ground where the dirt was, the same thing that she was made of, and the same thing that she was made of, she was crawling on top of to get to the King of Kings, the man who had the garment, the man who had the clothes. It was that man that she saw. And when she heard about it, when she heard about him and everything that he did, he came to the man and was crawling on the ground, was crawling on the dirt, and was crawling in the place, in the thing that she was made of. And what she said was, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Do you see the woman? Do you see yourself crawling on the ground, trying to find the man who has all the answers? This is what this woman did. She said, if I could just touch his clothes, I will be healed. So she crawled on the ground, got in the dirt, and started crawling and pressing her way to Jesus. So she thought that if I touched the part that was dragging on the ground, the dirtiest part of the garment, the dirtiest part of the cloak, I will be healed. And what happened to her is that immediately, it says immediately, straightway, automatically, suddenly, her bleeding stopped. And she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Oh, please don't miss what just happened to her. She touched the dirtiest part of Jesus's garment, and immediately after that, it wasn't a week later, it wasn't a day later, it wasn't an hour later, it wasn't a month later, it wasn't a year later, but it was immediately the problems that she had, she finally found the answers to. There was no wait, there was no there was no decline. It was immediately her faith and her actions gave her the miracle that she had been waiting on. She knew that the people had failed her. She knew that she couldn't go to the church. So what she had to realize is that if I put my pride to the side and I become humble and I get on the ground and I get to where I need to get to and I find the man who has all the answers, I'm not going to wait for him to come to me. me, but I'm going to become to him. Even when his back was turned to the woman said, I'm still going to crawl my way to Jesus. I'm still going to press my way to Jesus. I'm still going to find the man who has all the answers. And this is exactly where I find myself. I find myself just like this woman, trying to crawl my way to the man who has all the answers. I know what you've been thinking, and I've been asking myself the same question. Zach, how do you keep on pressing yourself? How do you keep on stressing yourself? How do you keep on stretching yourself? I know you come up to the church week after week after week. I know you come up to the church and write these sermons and figure out what you need to do. Zach, how in the world do you keep stressing yourself like you do? Well, it's because I found the answers to every problem that I've had. Dion, I have a question for you. Dion, I know that you are running out. You have a car now. I know that you're wasting your gas money. I know you come up here to the church and record these. Dion, I have a question for you. Why do you say that you do what you do? Dion, I have a question for you. Aren't you in college? Don't you have a job? Don't you have a family? Don't you have a dog? Dion, why do you come up here week after week after week? It's because Dion told me, Zach, I'm not doing this because you asked me to, but I'm doing it because I found the answers to every problem that I have. Pastor Taylor, I know you're watching the sermon. Pastor Taylor, I have a question for you. Why do you do what you do? Not just week in and week out, but day in and day out, night after night after night, day after day after day. Why do you stretch yourself like you do? Why do you keep pushing and why do you keep going? It's because Pastor Taylor had to tell me, Zach, I found the answers to every problem that I'm facing. Minister Winfrey's in the office. Minister Winfrey, why do you do what you do? Why do you keep going like you keep going? You come in day in and day out. It's because Minister Winfrey had to let me know, Zach, I'm not doing this because Pastor Taylor asked me to. I'm not doing this because I need money, but it's because I found the answer to the problems that I'm facing. It's when the world is around us and the waves are crashing, we can march on because we found the answer to the problems. We found the answer to every problem that we're facing. We found the answer to every problem that we're facing. We found ourselves crawling on the ground, trying to find the answers. We would turn to people, and people didn't have the answers. We couldn't come into the church. We couldn't have an actual worship service. So we had to realize, I've got to dig deep within myself. I've got to be humble. I've got to throw that pride thing away, and I've got to get on the ground and press my way to the man who has all of the answers. I don't know who this is for, but this is what it's needing you to do. You're hearing this sermon, and it's in your head that if I could just press my way to get to the man. But the thing about it is, you've got to put action in the thing that you're thinking. You've got to take the step of faith. I understand that not a lot of people can take leaps. I think leaps are it's not what a lot of people can do. But you got to take steps. Steps are practical. Leaps aren't practical, but steps are practical. Can you put one foot after the other? Can you put one foot after the other? And if you can take steps of faith, you don't got to take leaps, but if you can take steps of faith, that's what matters. So if you say, Zach, I'll pray twice this week, that's a step. Zach, if you say, I'll open up in worship just on Sundays, just for you, that is a step. If you say, Zach, I'll help you in ministry, that's a step. And this is what this woman did. She took steps of faith. Because of that, she found her answers. She found her answers to every problem, to everything that was happening. She found her answers. I don't know who this is for, but you have so many questions. You have so many things that is surrounding your life. But the point of the passage and the point of these past 2 weeks, maybe not even for a sermon thing or a church thing or a ministry thing, but even for myself personally, I think it's to let me know, Zach, Jesus is the answer. I think that's literally the entire point. Just to help me understand. Zach, sometimes you search in all the wrong places. It says that Jesus is the answer. I don't want to leave you right here. It says Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Verse 31 says, "You see the people crowding against you." His disciples answered, "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" Understand that the touch from this woman was interesting because it was a touch that Christ had never felt before. Christ, he was pressed by people. Christ was surrounded by people. And the one person that touches him in a kneeled position, in a humble position, admitting that she doesn't have the answers, that woman got Christ's attention. Yeah, he said, "Who touched me?" I've never felt a touch like that before. Imagine you getting Christ's attention because he's never heard you pray like that before. Imagine you getting Christ's attention because he hasn't seen you open up that Bible in like a month. Imagine you getting Christ's attention because he's never seen you worship like that before. Imagine you getting Christ's attention because he's never seen you work and serve like that before. So what happened to this woman? He said, "Where have you been?" "I've been waiting on you." It says, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Understand, Jesus never asks a question that he doesn't have the answer to. He asked the question to guide you to the right answer. Don't miss what I just said. I'll say it again. Jesus never asks a question that he doesn't know the answer to. He asked the question to guide her to the right answer. He said, "Who touched me?" And he kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Hear his words. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. It's your faith that's healing you. And so during this time, this month of inconvenient Christianity, a lot of things in my life have been inconvenient. A lot of things in ministry haven't seemed convenient. A lot of things in my social life and school have not seemed convenient. But I think what God is trying to get us to know is that your faith is what frees you from your suffering. I'm going to pray. Father, I thank you so much because it's during this time, it's in this phase of our lives that we could be facing inconvenient Christianity. But God, I want you to make us hungry again and hungry enough to press our way towards you. Jesus, we recognize and admit to you that we've been going to all the wrong people. We've been going to all the wrong places. But God, we know that you have the answers. God, help us in our lives to turn to you, even when it's inconvenient. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, this is Minister Zach coming to you live from the Spring. Please remember to prepare for your new normal.